Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the CLA Environmental Law Section's webinar on environmental law career panels in city government. My name is Claire McLeod Ruiz, and I am your moderator for today's panel. And I am the new Lawyers Section Liaison to the Environmental Law Section Executive Committee of the California Lawyers Association. And I am also an associate attorney at Beveridge and Diamond. I have the honor of introducing you to today's esteemed panel of environmental attorneys joining us from 4 different city attorneys' offices from across the state. Following their introduction, our panel members will share their insights and experiences from their various environmental law careers within city government. We will reserve the last 15 minutes of this panel for audience questions. If you have any questions during the panel, please submit them via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we will address as many as we can during the Q&A segment. In addition to today's webinar, our series on environmental law careers will continue in the coming months with a webinar on environmental careers in state government and other sector-specific presentations. If you are interested in learning more about environmental careers across sectors, please do stay in contact with the Environmental Law Section and New Lawyers Section of the California Lawyers Association for more information on those events. Before we get to introduce our panel members for today, I'd like to provide some background to everyone in attendance on the organizations that are sponsoring today's webinar. The California Lawyers Association, or CLA, is a nonprofit voluntary organization dedicated to the professional advancement of attorneys practicing in the state of California. Within CLA, there are multiple sections. 2 of those sections are the California New Lawyers Section, or NLS, and the Environmental Law Section, ELS. NLS represents all lawyers in California within their first 8 years of experience, and its mission is to advance practical skills, leadership, and pro bono opportunities, networking, and support the needs of California's diverse community of new lawyers. ELS's mission is to advance the quality, breadth, and availability of information and services related to environmental, natural resources, land use, energy law, and enhance the profession by cultivating a well-informed, collegial, and diverse group of lawyers and law students throughout the state. Both ELS and NLS are co-sponsors of today's webinar, and there are a multitude of ways to get involved with all of these fantastic organizations, which are listed here on this slide. We will also announce some upcoming events and opportunities at the end of today's panel, so please stick around once we wrap up the Q&A session. With that, I have the pleasure of welcoming all of our panel members for today's webinar, starting with Miles Hogan. Miles is a senior assistant attorney with the city of Ventura, and Miles joined the city's attorney's office in 2016. He specializes in water, wastewater, and environmental law, and advises the Ventura Water Department and the city's Water Commission. Previously, Miles worked at a private law firm representing cities and public agencies. Miles holds a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology from UCLA and a law degree from UC Davis School of Law. He currently serves as the chair of the Environmental Law Section of the California Lawyers Association. Next on our panel, we have Nargis Choudhry, who is a deputy city attorney with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. Nargis advises Los Angeles World Airports, overseeing environmental, water law, and real property law matters. She has experience at law firms, a Fortune 200 oil company, and an S&P 500 real estate investment trust. Nargis received her JD from UCLA School of Law and an MA from USC, as well as a BA from Occidental College in American Studies. Nargis is an advisor to the Environmental Law Section of the California Lawyers Session. We also have Darcy Brown joining us on today's panel, who is a deputy city attorney with the Fresno City Attorney's Office. Darcy provides legal guidance on California Environmental Quality Act compliance and other environmental planning issues. She has over 15 years of experience in environmental compliance and resource management across California. Darcy holds the position of secretary with the Environmental Law Section of the California Lawyers Association. The final member of our panel is Andrea Ruiz-Esquide, who is a deputy city attorney with the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. Andrea has worked as a deputy city attorney at the San Francisco City Attorney's Office since 2007. Prior to that, she was a law fellow at Shute, Mahale, and Weinberger LLP in San Francisco, as well as a law clerk to the Honorable John T. Noonan Jr. at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. She graduated from Berkeley Law in 2004 with a certificate in environmental law and policy. She also has a PhD in history from Columbia University. In her current role, Andrea advises different city departments and commissions within San Francisco on a wide array of matters under local, state, and federal environmental law and land use issues. She also represents the city in state and federal court. Andrea is an advisor to the environmental law section of the California Lawyers Association. With that, it is time to dive right into our panel. So please join me in welcoming our panel members to the screen. Thank you all so much for joining us for today's panel. I'm not sure if here we go. We're going to stop sharing so we can see all of our panel members clearly. And we're all in view now. So with all of your wonderful introductions presented, I'd like to dive right into our discussion. And I'd like to acknowledge that not everyone in attendance of today's webinar may be familiar with the structure of city government. So to start, I'm hoping that each of you could provide a level set on how your respective offices within city government are organized and where your particular roles fit within that framework.
Thank you so much, Claire, for getting us started, and good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Miles, and we're so happy you're here and interested in a career in city government, practicing environmental law. Here at the City of Ventura City Attorney's Office, we have 7 attorneys. So there is the city attorney, and then two senior assistant city attorneys, one that supervises litigation and the other who supervises transactional work, which is my position. And then we have 4 assistant city attorneys that work either on litigation or transactional matters. And when I came to the city, I was the 6th attorney, a new position created to focus on water and wastewater law. And then we were able to get another position about 2 years ago. And just for everybody's reference, Ventura has a population of around 110,000 people, and normally somewhere between 70 and 90,000 in population is when a city may have an in-house city attorney's office. Smaller cities often will contract out for their city attorney work. And that's what I did prior to coming to the city at a private firm.
Thanks so much for that insight, Miles. That's helpful background information. Nargis, Andrea, or Darcy?
I can go next, just for contrast. My name is Andrea, and I work at the San Francisco City Attorney's Office, which is a large city attorney's office. We have about 380 employees, of which about 200 are attorneys. And it's a really active law office, and it's organized by subject area expertise. I'm in the land use and environment team. There's a contracts team. There's a children and families team. There's an airport team, etc. One interesting feature about our office as the city attorney is an elected official under the charter. So he or she has some independence vis-a-vis the political appointed, elected powers, the board of supervisors and a mayor, which means that the city attorney can, under the charter, bring suit affirmatively under his or her own name, with or without the support of the political branches. And so I'm a deputy, we're all deputy city attorneys, and I'm a deputy in the land use and environment team. And I do both litigation and advice work.
That is quite the contrast. Thank you for sharing. Darcy and Nargis, how do your roles and government structures compare?
So Fresno is a larger city than some people appreciate. We actually have a population of close to 500,000 people, and we're the major metro area in a very large county and really the center of the Central Valley. So there's a lot happening here. Fresno is a charter city with a strong mayor form of government. So our mayor is elected separately from city council. And the city attorney's office operates independently from the rest of city government, but the city attorney is appointed and serves at the pleasure of the council. I would say we're a mid-sized municipal law firm, really. We've got about 35 attorneys in addition to the city attorney. And we're organized into several different divisions. So I'm in the land use division, and we have about 16 attorneys that just are in land use. But we all sort of do separate things. We have our little niches. And then the city also has attorneys who do human resources, litigation, and code enforcement. Yeah.
That's great. We have so many different aspects of what city governments can be represented today. How about you, Nargis?
Yes, I'm with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, and it's a very large department. The office is one of the larger employers. It has 500 attorneys, and with staff, you double that in terms of staffing. So we have quite a few areas where people do work. We have 3 proprietary departments. That's essentially departments that are run separately financially from the rest of the city. And these would be the Department of Water and Power, LA Department of Water and Power, the Port of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles World Airports, where I work. We also have a downtown office that has a number of divisions, such as Public Rights Division, and people that work for sanitation and others that do environmental work. We find that we have a number of areas of law or overlay. Department of Water and Power works with the California Public Utilities Commission. The Port of Los Angeles deals with the Tidelands Trust and the Clean Trucks Program, which is rather major. At LAWA, where I am, we work with the FAA on various matters, and there's a range of that. The Department of Defense on certain issues relating to environmental matters. And downtown works on CERCLA issues. We do too, just CERCLA issues and oil wells and things like that, and lawsuits against PFAS manufacturers. So at the airport, I work for LAWA, which owns and operates Los Angeles International Airport, also Van Nuys General Aviation Airport, which is the largest general aviation airport in the country. And as well, we hold a substantial real property holdings in Palmdale Airport related. Our work ranges the gamut. At LAWA, we have about 20 attorneys. There are 2 of us that focus on environmental law. One handles a lot of CEQA and some certain other matters. I handle compliance issues, and there's groundwater adjudication matters and various other things. So that's how we're divided.
Thank you all so much. That's all such helpful background for today's discussion. Keeping our panel going, I'd like to know if each of you could share a bit more about what drew you to your current role in city government and how you began in environmental law. Nargis, can we start with you for this question?
Sure. In my experience, I was previously actually a real property attorney. And at one point, I worked for an oil company, Union Oil Company of California, one of the larger landowners in California that people may not be aware of. And my work focused on real property law. But working in an oil company, you find that everything you do interfaces with environmental law as well. And in that as well, it turns out with the real estate deals that I was working on, the environmental issues were there. We interfaced with a lot of entities, and those included governmental agencies, cities, and school districts, among others. So we had a relationship with those as well. So it prepared me well for this governmental work in environmental law. So that's been my experience. I've had terrific experience there, and my experience included working on a matter involving a bulk fuel transfer facility that turned into a major park in Seattle, in the Seattle area, walking distance from the Space Needle, and all kinds of other things, which is really exciting to see, an environmental hazardous place turn into a public a sculpture park, a very nice one. So it's nice to transform a city that way and then move on into government work where we also do a range of work that's interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Sure. Each of you have such diverse backgrounds in terms of your sector and practice area experience leading up to your environmental law careers in city government. And environmental city government work involves so many different intersections between the complexities of municipal, state, federal law, land use, environmental compliance, and the list truly does go on. Have each of you, how have each of you and your backgrounds informed how you navigate these complex intersections in your roles? Darcy, can we turn to you for this?
Yeah. So I sort of had a mid-career shift into law. I went to law school in my late 20s. And before that, I had a career in forestry and natural resource management, as well as complex environmental compliance matters. And so I had a background that introduced me to NEPA and the public involvement process involved in NEPA when I was working for the Forest Service for the federal government. And then I also worked for Southern California Edison doing regulatory compliance on their hydroelectric installations. So that was a really interesting background for me to have. I also did some nonprofit work here and there. And then I went to law school. So I had that background going into being a student. And I actually thought that I wouldn't really work as an attorney when I got out of law school. I have ended up working as an attorney and I love it, but I've done this and that since I got out. I did some housing litigation, which was really fantastic. I also worked for a private firm for a while doing land use and transactions. And now I'm with the city. And so my background in all of those different sectors and even different legal practices has helped me to see every side of every issue that I work on for the city, because there are a lot of different interests involved in everything that we do. And it's very important for us to function as a government entity to make sure we're keeping everybody's interests in mind as we move forward. So that's been really helpful to me. Also, I will say that having an environmental science degree has been helpful in this practice because I spend a lot of my time in this role reviewing scientific data that will support the city's determinations on primarily CEQA documents. But I also practice NEPA and historic preservation. I handle wireless communication facilities and land use covenants, and I do government ethics. And so having a diverse professional and educational background really has helped me be successful in a role here that is very demanding and presents something new every day.
That's certainly a significant amount of considerations to balance on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure that each of you, in addition to balancing those considerations, also see great impacts from the work that you do on environmental issues at the local government level. I'm curious if one of you could share a particular memorable or rewarding case or project that you've worked on and the associated impact that it had. Maybe, Andrea, if we could turn to you.
Sure, yeah, I have many cases and matters that I'm proud of, but in thinking about this question, I think one that comes to mind that I would like to highlight first I want to highlight it because it's not a litigation matter, it's an advice matter, and I think advice sometimes gets shortchanged when law students think about the law. We do a lot of very interesting things on the advice side. And this it's a program called the Transportation Sustainability Program, or TSP, which the city did back in the 2014 to 2016 range. And it was a cluster of policies and initiatives related to transportation. One of them was to adopt a new fee related to new development under the Mitigation Fee Act to get money from new development to enhance public transportation. Another one was to create a new TDM ordinance or transportation demand management ordinance, which are requirements for new development to incentivize sustainable transportation. And that was super cool because we had to deal with how to offer a vast panoply of different options for developers to satisfy the requirements. And we had to analyze those under CEQA and under like transportation efficiency metrics to see how much would you do if you provided bicycles versus if you provided this or that. So it was very technical and very fluid. And then the most fun of the three components was helping the city navigate away from the LOS, standard of review, threshold for transportation impacts under CEQA, which had been, as those of you who practice or understand or are curious in CEQA, had been like a very important metric that people have been using for CEQA documents. And the state was moving away from that into the threshold or the metric that we use now, which is VMT, vehicles miles traveled, which is a more sustainable, environmentally focused metric. But the city was doing this kind of in advance of the state. We had been trying to create a new metric from the 90s. So it was like reinventing the wheel and really thinking about how should we think about transportation impacts under CEQA and what makes sense and how would you measure them and how would you compare them. And we had weekly meetings with a vast panoply of experts and different members of the city family and outsiders, and even the state experts would come sit at those meetings. And I felt if anything can prove that being a lawyer, you can do creative work. And this is it. Like, we're actually creating, how should we think about this? And in thinking about this answer for this panel, part of it is because it's San Francisco, right? So it's big and it's creative and it has like a reputation of being kind of thinking outside the box. But in seeing how the VMT metric has been implemented in different cities along upper north and south of the state, I think a lot of people have been creative with it because it is difficult. So I guess the bottom line is, being an attorney, you can do actually pretty interesting, creative, and collaborative work. That's what I wanted to highlight.
That's an incredibly rewarding outcome. And I'm curious if the rest of the panel members, I'd like to open it up, and you all do such inspiring work. If any of you had some memorable cases or matters you'd like to share with the panel today.
Thanks, Claire. I can go next and share about one of my favorite projects that I work on. Andrea and I do very different things day to day. So I do a lot of water and wastewater work, and one project that I worked on since I've been at the city and will continue working on it for years and years to come. The city is actually under a federal consent decree where it has a wastewater treatment plant and discharges its tertiary treated effluent to a local estuary at the end of the Santa Clara River. And it was required to study what the appropriate amount of that discharge to the estuary should be in order to have it be restored and more beneficial to endangered species that occupy the estuary. There's two species of fish and at least two species of birds that are endangered. And so the city analyzed that and is implementing now a potable reuse project where it has to divert from discharge the remaining amount and put it to beneficial reuse. And so we are going to be constructing a new advanced water purification facility, treating the water, and then it'll be injected into a local groundwater basin where it stays for a certain amount of time and then is later extracted and put into the potable water system. So it's a really neat, interesting project. It touches on almost every environmental issue you can think of. Water quality issues, water supply issues, the Endangered Species Act, dealing with large construction projects, grants, federal funding, property acquisition. I mean, you name it. So it's very interesting and satisfying work, and it's also very forward-thinking of the city. This sustainable project that'll really prepare the city for climate change, and also to be able to accommodate growth for more affordable housing and housing needed to address the housing crisis in California. So I really enjoy working on that, and just want to give that as an example of the type of interesting work you get to do in-house working at cities.
That's a fantastic project, and so intersectional too. Thank you, Miles. Nargis and Darcy?
Yeah, I'll go next. I've had a wonderful project that I did at the airport. It happened to be the very first project they assigned to me when I arrived. And this is the acquisition of a 20-acre parking lot property immediately adjacent to Terminal 1, a very highly regarded property for the airport. And Terminal 1 is the Southwest Terminal, and it was long sought after for several decades. The timing was never right, or for various reasons. But when I came in, they handed it to me, and it was a great assignment. It involved, it's now being called, because of the numbering, Terminal 1 is being called Terminal 0 at some point for development. And when you acquire the property, there's a lot of due diligence review. There's title, leases. There were billboards. It happens to include the highest performing billboard in all of LA County is right on that property. There were soils issues, environmental issues. It was formerly military related use in the past there. So there were some environmental issues. It involves an aspect of the runway protection zone area would be a modification. And that relates to potential amended Caltrans airport operating permits and affecting the FAA airport layout plan. It involved licenses and access agreements. It was rather complex, more than you might think, and it was completed successfully. And someday I hope to see it as an actual new terminal there adjacent, and that's a real meaningful contribution to the LAX site. So that's one example, and there are other things people do, and so it can be quite interesting work.
Really meaningful project. Thank you, Nargis. Darcy?
Yeah, I kind of thought of a different angle of a project that made it memorable for me. There was a project that we took on to maintain a recreation facility that we provide for children and families. And this facility actually exists in the forest up above Fresno, in Fresno County, but up on the Sierra National Forest. And so that facility operates under a permit. So the city of Fresno has a permit with the federal government through the Forest Service for a recreation facility. And this has been here for a very long time. And because these are very old structures, they need work done. But in order to do that renovation work, we have to satisfy CEQA and NEPA, and we have historic preservation concerns that come into play as well. And so it was an opportunity for me to work with a multidisciplinary team within the city, but also I got to work with some of my old coworkers from the Forest Service. And it really fell within what was my wheelhouse while I was there. So my personal understanding of the internal processes for the Forest Service to do work under a federal permit was actually critical in getting everything, all the boxes checked so that we could move forward with this massive project that provides a really fantastic opportunity primarily for disadvantaged youth who are in the city and who otherwise probably wouldn't have the opportunity to go out and enjoy our local forests. So that was really rewarding for me.
Thank you so much, Darcy. That's a great perspective, and goes to note of the full circle career successes. Each of you have had a multitude of successes in your respective careers, as is evident, and this is true across a spectrum of initiatives that each of you are involved on. From your perspectives, what skills or qualities do you believe are essential for someone pursuing an environmental law career in city government? Miles, would you kick us off with this?
Sure, thank you, Claire. Yeah, so I think for skills, the baseline skills, it's good to know about the Brown Act, which is the state's open meetings law, or sunshine law, which is basically following with the right steps and procedures to make sure that all city business is conducted at an open and noticed public meeting. And the idea behind it is that the public should have the opportunity for its government to watch its government make its decisions. And those decisions shouldn't be happening, you know, behind closed doors. And so that's the whole idea behind the Brown Act, so that members of the public can participate and watch those meetings. So definitely reviewing the Brown Act and having a background there. The Public Records Act is really important. We deal with public records requests daily. I'm sure all of us work on responding to those in a timely manner and advising our clients on ensuring they comply with the Public Records Act. Under federal, it's the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. And then conflict of interest laws are also important to be aware of in city government. So the Political Reform Act. So those are three key areas. I think it's good to have a baseline familiarity. And then otherwise, I think when you're looking for jobs in this area, some of the offices look for people to have at least a few years of experience under their belt, because they're not really in a position to be able to train. They need people to kind of hit their ground running. So you may find that you want to look outside of some of the major cities. You may need to go to a more rural location or smaller city that has openings. But I think in doing so, you'll get a lot of really valuable experience. In my office, you know, there's one person that works with one department, and they really have to cover all the issues for that department. So you get a lot of experience very quickly. So I think I would just be open-minded and flexible if you really want a career in this area, to be able to relocate or maybe not try with that exact office or that exact location you wanted. Because once you have some years of experience, you'll really be marketable to be able to move up and move around if needed. But for me, I fell in love with Ventura, and at the moment I have no plans of leaving, and it's great here. And then the last thing I'll say is I worked for a private law firm that works with public agencies for a few years. And I found that to be really rewarding experience, and I got a lot of experience very quickly, which made me appealing for the job I applied for 9 years ago here at the city. And I found that not a lot of other associates at that firm were necessarily interested in environmental law. So whenever an environmental law project came up, you know, I raised my hand and said, I'll do that. And so I got to work on all sorts of environmental issues at that firm. So I think that was an interesting pathway for me to gain some experience in city government by getting to do environmental law, which really wasn't on my radar when I was in law school. So it all kind of worked out serendipitously for me.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Miles. Did any other of our panel members have some insight on essential skills for someone who may be interested in pursuing these kind of careers?
Well, I can take a slightly supplement what Miles has said. I agree with those wonderful points. Some guidance, I would say, if you join a municipal law department, would be to, in addition, learn the board and council process in your area, learn what it is and the steps to take. That's foundational. And as you perform the work, be inquisitive, be careful, ethical, and collaborative. You work with multiples of people. I would say that if you can, seek a mentor, but also take the opportunity to mentor yourself. Look at documents that you have. If you see that they've been changed, see how they've changed, what you can learn from that. Just become somebody who learns everything. And stay flexible. Consider different pathways to resolve matters in negotiations, for example. There may be more than one solution. Consider the whole range of possible solutions, and you'll find yourself more able to get to a resolution. And I think those are some of the tips I would say.
That's great. Thank you, Nargis. And thank you, Miles. I'm curious for the panel. We have so many new lawyers or law students that have joined this call today or that may be watching retroactively. And many of them may be interested in exploring career paths in city government. And I was hoping that each of you could share what advice you might give to someone who is considering an environmental law career in city government versus other sectors. And with that, if someone was particularly interested in getting a job at your organization, how might they go about doing so? Darcy, can we start with you?
Yeah, so I will just start by saying, if you think you might want to work in city government, do it. It's wonderful. It's a great career path. I won't discourage anyone who has that inclination. It provides really wonderful work-life balance. Now, my situation is a little bit different than in some other cities, but I don't have billable hours in my job. I just do the work that comes to me, sort of the way you would anywhere else. And some city attorneys are going to have to bill hours because of funding requirements or something, but it's not the same billable hours requirement pressure that you're going to get in most private law firms. And so if that's something that sort of scares you away from the practice of law, consider that you can work as an attorney and not be under some of that private practice pressure. And there are trade-offs, right? The pay isn't the same as if you go to work in big law, but I will say that the pay is great and the benefits are wonderful and the work environment tends to be very collegial, which I enjoy. So I really like what I do. But if you are new coming into law or environmental practice, I would encourage you to really think carefully about what role you want to play in matters, because when you're working for the city attorney, you are not an advocate. And so if you are very passionate about environmental law because you want to, pursue environmental justice work or something, just for example, you may not get to advocate for what you personally care about as much as you want to in a city government role. And so just consider what role you want to play and try lots of different things. Don't be afraid to go to work for a legal aid organization for a while or something, just to see what fits you and your personality best. And anybody who wants to practice environmental law, I always encourage to not just read the law, but also read the science. Try and become a student of environmental science. Attend conferences that have to do with city government, but also attend conferences that have to do with the practice of environmental law, or there are a lot of scientific conferences that you can go to that are extremely helpful as well. And I will say our environmental law section puts on the best conference in the state. So if you haven't attended, you must come see us this fall. And then lastly, I'll just say, consider that being in municipal government does require a lot of professionalism and patience and resilience. Because sometimes things do move at the speed of government, and sometimes the outcome on a project isn't what you hoped it would be. And you do have to maintain your professionalism and collegiality with everyone else in city government and even those outside of government who are interested in the outcome of the matter. So just, always have a long view on everything you're working on. But I would strongly encourage anyone who's interested to jump on into city government as soon as you can find a position. And if you're looking for an internship, come to Fresno, talk to me. We hire a lot of people here. There are a lot of opportunities, even for people who may not have a lot of experience. And so if you're having a hard time finding where to go, come join me.
That's great advice and sounds like fantastic opportunities at your office, Darcy. For the rest of the panel, any additional advice or maybe directives on how someone might get involved in your office?
I just want to reiterate that often law firms and municipal law firms offices don't hire right out of law school. So just be patient, keep the long game in mind. And an advice I give everybody, whether they want to go into private or public service, is to be collegial and to keep up with your contacts. Like, ask us to be friends in LinkedIn now, follow up, make friends, talk to people, keep up with people, and you're going to be building your network. So it's just a slow process, but have faith. And I wanted to put a plug for municipal law practice as well. In addition to what everybody else has said, I find it intellectually very stimulating. I have a PhD in history before, and I like thorny questions. And this is nothing if not thorny, because the municipalities sit at the bottom of the whole structure of government in the US, right? So we have local law, we have state law, and we have federal law, and how those three levels interact and intersect is often a question that we need to face. And it's not always the same answer in all circumstances. It's very, very germane with like interesting things to research. So I find that it keeps me on my toes and I like that.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Nargis and Miles?
I'll mention for the city of Los Angeles, it's a very large office, so I imagine a lot of them are criminal attorneys, so doing different work, but there is a contingent doing environmental work and related matters. I found the groups to be very collegial. I really enjoy that aspect of it, and working with the client groups is always rewarding. I found that very a good thing. When you get a job in the city, you may want to stay there forever, because a lot of people do. It's a good job. It's nice and secure. It has good benefits, healthcare, holidays, and other benefits that supplement that. So it's pretty good. We do have a couple of ways to get in, because people I know are looking for job opportunities. I would suggest looking at the Los Angeles City Attorney website. Our current city attorney is Heidi Feldstein Soto, and she includes a careers page. On that careers page, you will find links to city attorney jobs that may be currently out there. Also, law clerk and volunteer jobs. The volunteer jobs are basically internships. We're fortunate to have one right now in our airport division that started yesterday. They also have a post-bar fellowship program for those people that have a JD and are awaiting CalBar results. And interestingly, they also have a pathway program for students 18 to 24. I know you may not be in this group, but you may know someone who from the LA Community College District as a pathway program, as the LA College Promise program. So there are multiple ways potentially to get your foot in the door. Also, for those that are more advanced and working at law firms and are seeking to find opportunities to work on matters, we do have proposals we put out for requests for proposals for outside environmental council, other council, and various other things. We participate in RAMP LA, RAMPLA, which is the Regional Alliance Marketplace for Procurement. That's our city's procurement portal. You'll find that there, not just for the city of LA, but for the county, many cities, and so forth. So those are the two sources. Check our website for jobs and RAMP LA for proposal opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nargis. Certainly many opportunities there. Miles?
Yeah, I'll just offer a brief suggestion. And currently we don't have openings, but for the smaller offices, I would just check their websites periodically, and government job websites where they'll post there as well. 2 years ago, we did hire several people in our office, and 3 other city attorneys' offices in our county were hiring for a position at the same time. So these positions, they do come up. So keep looking. And my only piece of advice is if you don't have direct municipal law experience yet, but you're still applying, that's okay. I would just highlight in your cover letter what transferable skills you have that would be useful for the practice of environmental law. At least one of the people we hired 2 years ago didn't have any direct municipal experience, but they've been an excellent hire because they had really good transferable skills, and we were able to train them up on the specifics of municipal law. So I just want to put that one specific piece of advice out there. Make sure you do a cover letter and highlight, any transferable skills and specifically why you're interested in that office and working in local government.
Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences and all these valuable insights over the course of the panel today. We now have about 10 minutes for some audience questions. And again, if you have a question for your panel, please do use the Q&A function and we will get to as many questions as we can. I'm going to start off by sharing some of the questions that have already come in through the Q&A function. So to start, we have a question that is asked, what emerging trends in environmental law should new attorneys be aware of, especially within the city government?
I can go first on that one if you'd like, Claire.
Great. Thank you.
So I'll just highlight one thing and I'll let the rest of the panelists think about what they do as well. Housing law is a really big deal for cities. And most of us have just revised our housing element, which is part of our general plan. And the law is always changing and it will continue to change. I think that housing is a really great way to get your foot in the door with city government. And there's a lot of opportunities to participate in community discussions around the housing element and housing law and housing rights. So if that's something that interests you at all, I would keep an eye on housing in all ways, shapes, and forms.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much, Darcy. We have another question that's come in. How can one stand out more as an applicant that has several years of legal experience at private law firms?
I can take that. I think definitely having experience is a good thing, not a bad thing. So just if you highlight your experience and if you explain that, again, going to Miles, like transferable skills, right? Like you did litigation, you did negotiations, you did real estate transactions. I mean, the skills are the same, whether they are from a private law firm or from a public sector. The legal work is very, very similar. So I think applicants from private firms are definitely very competitive in my experience.
That's great reassurance. Thank you, Andrea. The next question we've received is, how do you handle conflicting interests between environmental regulations and economic development in your cities?
I have thoughts on that if no one else wants to talk first, but I don't want to hog the mic, so I'll let others go first. No?
Well, I'll comment that if there are regulatory environmental requirements, those must be met. So you have to kind of juggle all of it. You may have something, for example, like if you need to do a cleanup, is it done now, just out of the blue here, if it's not affecting groundwater, or can you combine it with a project that's down the road that you know when it's going to happen? Do you do it at that right appropriate time and kind of handle it all at once? There are some different decisions that can be worked through. You need environmental consultants to help you. But as far as conflicting interests, the regulatory requirements do need to be met.
And a kind of larger kind of view of that question is that it's really not our role as attorneys to make those calls, sad as it is. Like, we may have lots of ideas about how to reconcile conflicting mandates and whether something should, preempt or be of superior kind of, preponderance. But that's mostly, those types of decisions are for the decision makers, for our clients to make. And we're there to advise and to kind of bring to their attention the potential conflicts, but ultimately it's for them to decide. And that's one of the tricky issues of being in this position, but I guess that's a tricky issue of being in any attorney position. The client is the one whose interest you want to advance.
Thank you both for that context. We've received another question. Are there adjudication positions at the municipal level in the environmental field?
So I'll chime in. This probably isn't a perfect response. So in summary, I can say no, but cities do appoint people to serve on commissions, like a planning commission. And so if you want to be in a decision maker's capacity within the government, you may look into trying to get appointed to the planning commission or like a parks commission or something like that.
And I can add that there are from time to time hearing officer positions. We don't have a position like that in our office, but I know some people who work at private firms where they play that role for a city or an agency. So that's the main role I can think of in local government. And if you're talking about groundwater adjudications, I could talk about that more, but I don't think that's what you were asking about.
Thank you both. We have time for one more question today, and the final question for the panel is, can you discuss any recent legal developments or cases that have significantly impacted your work in environmental law?
Well, I will pick off where I just start off where I just left off. The biggest shift in water law in the last, I guess, 11 years now is the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So before that, groundwater rights in California and groundwater in general was largely unregulated, but that act, known as SGMA, the acronym SGMA, was passed in 2014, and it set in motion a number of events. So local agencies had to be formed. They're called groundwater sustainability agencies to manage local groundwater basins that weren't already what's known as adjudicated by a court decision. And then they have to develop a plan to bring the basin into so that it's sustainable. And then they have 20 years to implement that plan. Soon after, the legislature also adopted the streamlined adjudication statute, so that groundwater adjudications, which are groundwater lawsuit cases, don't take as long as they have in the past. They can often take more than 10 years to complete. And so that law has really changed water law and water law practice in California. And so anybody interested in practicing water law at the municipal level, I encourage you to get background in that area. And if you get experience in that area, I'm sure you can find a job. It's creating a lot of work and actually lawsuits as people work to implement the law and over the coming decades. So that's one key area in the water law sphere.
And I could add really quickly something very different, but definitely a very big trend that we've seen, building up on what Darcy said before, is housing. And not just housing, but in the housing field, there's a big controversy between how much power or authority should local agencies and cities and counties have versus the state. And the state is exercising like a big, more and more regulatory authority and taking away local discretion in the housing field. And there's a lot of, backlash, and cities and counties are protesting and trying to find what the scope of their authority is. So it's a very interesting trend that has been happening for the last 10 years or so. And I can foresee will continue to develop as long as we have a housing crisis.
And I can add one last item, and that is PFAS, which is a major issue that I work on these days, and that's involved in AFFF firefighting foam at the airports, and there are some complications with PFAS. There's a multi-district litigation in South Carolina, and these are lawsuits against the PFAS manufacturers. These are going to be big, massive deals by the time everything's done. And then there's trying to understand how to deal with it when you have conflicting regulations. The FAA, for example, the federal regulations require us to use AFFF until recently in our firefighting foam. And yet there are these, everybody says, well, those are the forever chemicals, get rid of them. Yes, that's true, but you need an alternative. And a lot of the laws are actually exceeding the science. They want you to remove everything, but you can't technically. So it's a matter of, when can we, get up to the molecular level and solve these problems? We're not there yet. So anyway, PFAS is a big issue. There's a lot of litigation going on. There's a lot of trying to find solutions and transition to fluorine-free foam, which is in progress or completed. And so that's a big current issue.
All excellent questions and such wonderful answers from each of you, not only from our audience questions, but also for all the panel questions today. I want to thank you all for your engagement today and give a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing all their experiences and expertise. We hope everyone in the audience has found this discussion to be informative and inspiring. And before today's session closes out, we'd like to present a few ways to stay connected with and further engage with the environmental law section. The first upcoming event that we'd like to share is our annual student negotiations competition, which will take place on March 21st at UCLA School of Law. The competition is open to students in all of California's law schools who have completed their first year. Each law school can enter one team and nominate an alternate team. And the competition format involves 2 preliminary rounds that are each 60 minutes long, and 4 teams will advance to the final round. There are first and second prizes available, and the registration deadline for this competition is coming up on February 7th. So if you're interested in participating, please visit the link that's listed here. ELS also has a diversity conference in the works, which will be taking place early June 2025. So please save the date. It will take place at Loyola Law School and will involve a half-day event with 3 to 4 panels and a networking or mixer kind of event to close out the day. More information on the conference is coming, and please visit the link that's listed here if you're interested in attending. ELS also has an environmental law, diversity, and inclusion fellowship program, which provides opportunities for law students from diverse backgrounds to work in governmental or public interest environmental law organizations in order to develop their interests and skills in the field of environmental law. This particular program is 8 to 10 weeks, and it has a current assigned stipend of $8,000. It also includes assistance with mentorship matching and free attendance to ELS's Environmental Law Conference at Yosemite this fall, which Darcy mentioned earlier as the best environmental law conference in California. I can attest to that. The application for this diversity and inclusion fellowship program has passed, but applications for the summer of 2026 are due this fall. So please note that if you're interested. ELS also has a mentorship program which pairs newer attorneys and law students with more experienced attorneys to provide the practice area specific networking and professional development benefits that are listed here, and that so many newer attorneys are in seek of. The application for this program closed on December 20th of last year, but if you follow along at the link that's posted on this slide, you can be aware of applying for next year's program in the fall. Last but not least, we have the 2025 Environmental Law Conference at Yosemite. This year's conference will be taking place from October 16th to the 19th at the Tenaya Lodge in Fish Camp, California, which is minutes from Yosemite National Park. The conference features 27 educational sessions with stellar speakers, fun outdoor activities, and lots of social events. It's an excellent opportunity to meet and reconnect with environmental law friends and colleagues in a beautiful setting. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar. The links to the recording for today's session and materials for this session, as well as previous sessions, are available at the links provided on this slide. Please be on the lookout for future programs on our website, and do stay in touch with the members of today's panel via the contact information that I'll share on this final slide. Again, thank you all for joining. Please feel free to reach out and keep in touch.